Welcome to Shepherd's Coffee Talk. Today we're talking about, retirement, your wealth. Do you know where your money is? Do you have those bank account numbers, phone numbers, all those things that you might need in the future if things change and you're left alone?
When it's inevitable.
Yes.
Life goes on. Things are for sure. Life is death, taxes, and change. That's all we know for sure, right? Colleen O'Connell Campbell is a wealth advisor with RBC Dominion Securities, and I've had many conversations with Colleen about money, and she has such a bright perspective, I think a bit of a different perspective on our money and how we should embrace this idea instead of feeling like we either don't deserve to know or we don't want to know.
I don't want to worry about it. It's not my territory.
I think that's probably something you hear a lot about is overwhelming.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. I hear things like, well, even for people who have some wealth, they think, well, I don't really have very much. They're actually kind of repelled by some of the wealth, and it comes with sort of stereotypes of greed and that kind of thing, and that's not true. I really think we're all worthy of being wealthy, and it's when we're wealthy that we're actually able to give back and contribute to the society as a whole.
Good point. So it's the perception, this whole thing with money is something that I think people have a skewed view of. This world is very abundant. And if we always look at the fact that we think we don't have enough, we're always going to feel like we're not enough, that we don't have enough. But I think that's another piece of it, is how do we know that we have enough for our future? How do you gauge that?
It's a tricky question.
Big question.
because I think what it really boils down to is really looking at yourself and what is important to you and what do you want to achieve, and try not to look at your neighbor or your friend or the business down the street and look at what they're doing, because what they're doing has possibly nothing at all to do with you.
Right.
And frankly, at the end of the day, we, especially here in Canada, I'm not saying everybody, but as a population, we are very abundant. We have so much to be grateful for. And as a lot of your teachings are about starting at the gratitude level, to be grateful for what we have. And the thing about growing wealth isn't about hoarding money. It is about actualizing, what we were put here on this planet to do, and the wealth allows us to do that. So all those pieces put together.
Well, we really don't even know, we're living longer. We're in better health for longer. We want to do more things, whether it be travel or sports or whatever. But that's always the thing. How much money am I going to need once I retire? You hear people say, well, you're going to need 3 million or 4 million to be able to live to your 90s, mid-90s. But
I have clients who are living very comfortably on $25,000 to $30,000 a year. And when I talk about those numbers, I talk about what you actually have in your pocket, not what you have as the big number. And of course, we pay taxes and those kind of things. This is like what you're actually spending. And then I have other clients who need $100,000 a year to maintain their lifestyle. So that's the thing, is there isn't one exact answer. It depends on where you live. It depends on what are the things that you like to do. It depends on whether or not you actually have ongoing income that's still coming in, because you could talk about retirement. That could be a whole other topic, right? Because what it is retirement. The retirement itself is a phenomenon that's come out of the Industrial Revolution. So once upon a time, what did we do? We lived on farms. If we didn't live on a farm, somehow we were contributing all of our entire life to whatever it was to keep the household going. And then, the Industrial Revolution, and we created factories, and then people went to work for somebody else. And now it's sort of this coming back where a lot of people are freelancing, they're, or they're in that corporate job or that manufacturing job, and then they're leaving that, and maybe they've created some pool of wealth, or they have a pension, but they're actually continuing to do something else, whether it's writing a book, whether it's providing mentorship and coaching for a fee, whether it's setting up some other kind of enterprise. Retirement today is really taking a shift. There was really this period of time, maybe less than 100 years, where the retirement that we keep kind of coming back to, that there's a company that branded themselves a certain type of retirement at 55, right? And that's, I think gone to the
Oh my gosh, that is long gone, right?
What is
My
that?
mother
Right?
was 80 when she retired.
Yeah,
there you go.
And so you're going longer. I mean, maybe you reduce it, work fewer hours, take longer vacations.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's where people's self-worth come,
Right.
And their mental health
Sure,
So much.
exactly.
is better for
And
them.
I think a big piece in Colleen's business around the mental health and wellness of our finances is knowing, embracing it, taking a look at what it is so that you can feel confident you've got a handle on it rather than just pretending it isn't there. So talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so if I could take it like a bit of a spin on that, because there's sort of different pockets of people and that sort of thing, and sadly there's still a pocket of women out there that haven't necessarily taken ownership of that, and that's kind of scary, because here's why it's a problem. As women, we live longer. We live longer with more ailments, and we do tend to go through situations where we might be forced to be looking at investments for multiple reasons. Divorce, because we live longer. If we're in sort of the traditional marriage, husband-wife scenario, women live longer, so women will tend to be widowed and have to take on management of their finances, and if they haven't been doing that through the rest of their life, it can be very scary. Yeah, and who do you turn to, that sort of thing. There's an interesting statistic that I shared with you, Kathie, as we were kind of talking about getting together today, which is that 80% of women who lose their spouse are going to leave the advisor that they were working with within about a year. So wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't it maybe be better to I would implore my colleagues in wealth management and advisory services to be trying to engage with everybody in a partnership, but also as the individual who maybe has taken a step back and delegated things, get a little bit more involved and be conscious of where things are.
Because the bottom line of this business is trust.
It's trust. It's there's what's the rate of return? How do we save taxes? All those kinds of things. Great, but at the end of the day, the product that we're bringing to the table is really trust.
Yeah, I want to know you've got my back.
Yeah, and security.
I think that's a great little piece of advice, is to find somebody you trust to talk to, and make sure you're included in at least some of the conversations happening in your family around your wealth and the management of said wealth. Okay, so I think we've given some food for thought today, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Colleen's background too, because Colleen was a bit of a maverick, I guess we could say, back in the day, before it was cool to be the woman going to build the business and the man staying home, which happens quite a bit today, but you did that. When did that sort of happen for you and Scott?
Well, funny story, call it the universe, what have you. When we were dating, because we've been together since I was about 16, yes, and that's a whole other story. But it was always a bit of a joke between us that I was the person with the education. I was going to go to university. I was going to have the career, and he was a high school graduate who went into a trade. And he always said, you're going to be the career person, and I'll stay home with the kids. But it was sort of tongue in cheek, right? It wasn't really what we totally planned out. But what happened essentially, life, I was building my business, and my husband was working in a trade. We had 2 children. Our oldest son, who's now 19, at the time was 4, just starting junior kindergarten. It was half days then. My youngest was about 18 months old. We got a call on a Sunday night from our caregiver. We were working with a woman who had a home daycare. She called us up on a Sunday night and said, "I've decided to change my career, and I'm not going to have a home daycare anymore, and I'm giving you 2 weeks notice." So what do you do with 2 weeks? 2 weeks, right? So we sort of looked at each other, and it was November timeframe, and with his trade work, he was in industrial commercial plumbing, and he would often, especially if he was working with a smaller company, he would get laid off over the winter. So we said, okay, well, we can probably piece together a few weeks of my dad maybe finding something temporary, and then my husband said, well, I'll probably be laid off over the winter, so I'll look after the kids, and that'll give us time to find somebody. And that winter turned into about 10 years.
So he loved it. He enjoyed it.
He loved it. It was
Obviously.
it was amazing for me because, speaking to, being unusual, when I was starting my practice, And I looked around the office, and I said, don't compare. But you know, when you're in these kinds of environments, it's very A-type, very competitive. You're always being compared, and you're comparing yourself. It is the nature of things. I looked around at my male colleagues, of which, you know, we were like 4 women advisors in the office, and out of like something like 30. And I looked at the women. First of all, 3 of the women didn't have children.
Mm-hmm.
One of them had children that were a little bit more grown up, and I didn't really have anyone to compare myself.
Yeah,
and I looked at the men in my office who were growing their businesses, and they either had their significant other, their wife, stayed at home, or had a career that was, and this is not a comment, but a career that allowed for more time with the children, such as teaching, where you're off in the same pockets of time as your children, more kind of set hours, not, you know, building a business. And many of them also had nannies and stuff like that. And I said, well, you know what, reality is, in order to be able to dedicate time to the business, it was a great thing to have my husband at home. Right. So I knew that I didn't have to worry about those day-to-day things.
Anything, you could focus on what you had to focus on.
It was in the back of my head.
Right.
You know, there was still the superwoman thing. I wanted to be the Martha Stewart and bring in the cupcakes to school.
So
but
a little bit of guilt, for
sure. But it was
we
the
always
best.
have guilt.
It was the best thing.
Especially when you're a trailblazer.
Yep.
Especially when you're doing something that not everybody is doing. Colleen, this has been fantastic. If you have questions for Colleen, why don't you put them in the comments, and we'll invite Colleen back to answer some of those questions in the future if you're interested.
Absolutely, and if you're also interested, you can follow me. I have a podcast called I'm a Millionaire, So Now What, where I interview entrepreneurs, self-made millionaires, and wealthy Canadians.
Cool.
And it's a great place to learn all these stories. We bring in experts in wealth management, and we bring in experts in interesting things like cannabis and blockchain and
why not
cybersecurity. So just interesting stuff. So if you're into that, check it out.
Check it out.
Thank you.
You're a millionaire, so
Thank
now
you.
what?
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for coffee.